Ah, great. And we're live. Awesome. Okay, well, hi, everybody who's showing up. I'm sure there's a couple people joining us right now. So we've got a really great program this afternoon. And as more people sort of join, we'll get into that. But first, I would like to welcome everyone who's watching to this demo featuring a talented artist, Judy Villett, as part of the West Vancouver Community Arts Council's current exhibition at the Silk Purse Arts Centre, entitled Cherry Blossoms, a Textile Translation. It's an annual exhibition we produce alongside with the very talented and very dedicated people of the Vancouver Guild of Fiber Arts and Fiber Essence, who jury the exhibition and create some ancillary programming like this one here, the demos today. And so we're super happy to be working with them always. And as we get started, it's important that we acknowledge the lands on which we gather for cultural and artistic activities are the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. And in our case, those are the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And as guests, we here at the Arts Council are so thrilled to be on this beautiful land to enjoy and create and help support artists who create artwork that also celebrates it, like today, like the artwork today. And as I said earlier, Judy Villett is our very talented and amazing artist who is going to give us a little bit of a demo this afternoon. So say hi, Judy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm sure you're going to have a good time, and I want to ask you to think up some good questions for the question and answer after the video. That'll be fun.
Awesome. Great. And before we get to that, I'd like to introduce Monica Brammer. Monica is a talented artist, and she helps put together the demo component of this exhibition. Monica, do you want to tell us a little bit about the demos that are involved with Cherry Blossom?
Sure. Normally, in normal years, we've been fortunate enough to have demonstrations done on both Saturday and Sunday of the run of the exhibit. And we usually have one, maybe two artists in attendance in the gallery doing the crafts that they love to do and answering people's questions as they come in. And this has been a major part of our show, and it helps highlight textile art. This year, considering everything that's happened, we're not able to do that. So we found a very talented, tech-savvy artist who was willing to work in a totally new way, in a totally new dimension, in this brave new world, putting on the demonstration for this year. So we're really happy to have Judy and happy to have the opportunity to do this. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Monica. We have another special guest down here, Bonnie Addy, and she'll say a few words after we get through the demo. So yeah, like Judy said, if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the discussion or in the comment section below the video, and we will get to those once we get through the demo, which Judy made a fantastic video. It's a little bit of a tour of her studio and into her inspiration and creative process for making these fantastic textile landscapes, one of which is on display in the exhibition, Cherry Blossoms, a Textile Translation at the Silk Purse Arts Centre, and behind her in her screen. So let's see Judy's awesome demo.
Hi, my name's Judy Villett. I'm a Canadian textile artist, born in Alberta. I moved to Vancouver in 2005. I have an extensive career in textiles, teaching, lecturing, and judging. I've exhibited across Canada and internationally. Currently, I'm a New Westminster resident, recently moved to a large townhouse with a gorgeous studio space. So welcome to my space today. Today I'll address two imagined audiences: art lovers who may want to learn a new medium, fabric, and textile artists who may be interested in my kind of unusual technique for layering and assembling these little landscapes. I'll invite you, viewers, to jot down questions and comments as we go and get ready for the question and answer period right after the video. This is my cutting table with a padded floor area. This table is quite high. I'm a tall person and I want this table to be about 3 inches below my hip bone. And that gives me a good, safe, not too far to bend over. Good height for me. I have several tools here that are just essential for me. The rotary cutter, a very sharp blade, and must use caution. Beautiful rulers that have measuring units in inches because they're American tools. And here I have a cutting mat, and the mat has carborundum to keep the blade sharp. So these are the essential tools for many textile workers, quilters particularly. I have a nice piece of hand-dyed fabric here, folded, and I'm cutting through 4 layers, and I can actually cut through up to 12 layers with this large blade. Also, the size of the blade is better for ergonomics for my hand. I'm going to use the body weight to hold the ruler in position while I cut away from myself. Beautiful, accurate cut. Now, if I wanted to make, say, 3-inch strip, I would move the fabric to the right, and using the ruler, I would measure that 3-inch strip. Hold the ruler, and again, cut away from myself. Another advantage to this table is that it has a lot of storage room underneath. I can tuck towers of beautiful archival plastic boxes. Each box will have a project or a particular set of fabrics. We're now in one of my favorite play areas, the design wall. This is an 8 by 8 foot design wall made from pressboard that I can pin into, but also it's covered with thermolam, a very fuzzy compact batting that everything sticks to super well. So I can audition and try out fabrics. What colors would I like for this sky? Something moody. There's the landscape, and then in front of the landscape I have all kinds of possibilities for positioning, choice of the buildings. Now, let's take a minute and talk a little bit about my interest in the cherry blossoms. They came along and saved me from despair my first winter in Vancouver. A very long and dark and stormy one it was. And these cherries burst out, and I have been making pieces ever since. This is one kind of a medium size. It's kind of a collaboration because the resist screen print is made by Pat Crusoe, and I have modified and quilted that section. I got larger pieces, but I've also got some small ones, about this size, that I can layer and make into a much simpler composition. At the same time that I've been fascinated by the cherry tree, I've been watching high-rises sprout up around me. All the Lower Mainland has a set of high-rises wherever you look, especially near the SkyTrain. These two pieces kind of celebrate the monolithic sculptural quality of these big buildings. Also, what sticks out around them, between them, in front of them, behind them. Now you can start to see some actual layering. These two pieces combine cherry blossoms with the wall of high-rises. And quite often, if you're in downtown Vancouver, it is a wall. And it's really interesting to see how the aisles of trees soften the rigid geometric shapes. I use my camera for pictures and inspiration, but I also use a sketchbook. And this is a small one that's easy for me to carry around. I use a pen or pencil, make rough sketches, and those often are accompanied by quite a lot of text, by notes from the day, the lighting, and what I see and what I want to remember from that image. Fabric, there's endless choices. Many textile artists dye their own. These are both commercial prints, and they have changed my life, especially this one with this incredible digital print of the city buildings. And you can see right away how it influences what I do. This is the last full width of the fabric. It goes from very dark to very light, and that has given me lots of inspiration and wonderful shapes and textures, much quicker than I can make them myself. This piece is a gorgeous print of the cherry tree, just solid cherry blossoms, and that scale was just right by accident to combine with this. It's been a real treat to work with those fabrics. I'll be very sad when they disappear. But there's fall, and I have some gorgeous fall prints. And here I've got two pieces, one with the high-rise in front of the forest, one with the high-rise behind the forest. I started with the cutoff of that fabric, but somehow the scale doesn't seem quite right. It's okay in the background because the trees are small. So I have another digital print of fall trees, and this one with the big scale and the burst of color is the one I think I'll probably use here. So this is where I play, get ideas, try different backgrounds, try different foregrounds. These are pieces dyed, beautifully hand dyed by friends, both the backgrounds, and I don't do the hand dyeing myself. I purchased those and love working with them. Very subtle colors. Now it's time to talk about some of the techniques. I'd like to show you 3 different kinds of applique that I use currently. The first one is fusible or heat set. I'm going to use my oldest iron. I don't want to ruin a new iron using some of these heat-soluble products. This one is Steam-A-Seam Light. Because I'll be quilting over parts of it, I don't want a heavy product. It looks like this when it comes off, and it's 3 layers. There's a layer of parchment paper, a layer of very sticky plastic that's going to fuse, and then another piece of paper. So I'm going to take off the parchment paper. It's actually good for other purposes. And I'm going to heat set this piece. Well, let's just do that up here for just a couple of seconds. And to protect the iron, I'm going to put a piece of that parchment paper, and in a couple of seconds, this is completely fused to the fabric. And the lovely thing about this is that it's sticky on the back, so I can take the back of this and move it around on the back of the fabric and decide just where I want to position it. It's a very useful thing. Then after I cut out the piece, which I am about to do here, I've fused a piece of this Steam-A-Seam on the back of these pebbles. And I'm going to take my sharp little applique scissors and arbitrarily decide what I want to be the edge and start cutting around a certain set of these rocks. As you know, if you remember kindergarten, it's much better to move your paper than to move the scissors. Now I have this part. I'm just going to take the bottom off, tidy that up a little bit, and then I'm going to peel this paper off the back. And I'll start where it's going to peel the best, right here. And that paper goes into recycling, and that leaves a very thin, flexible, fine layer of fusible material on the back of the pebbles. I can then lay them onto the surface where I want to add them as a part of the design element. Here's a small little bookmark. This is how I use up really little scraps of fabric. And I have fusible on the back of the cherry blossoms. And I am positioning that onto this wild forest that is the background. So it's not the high rises now, it's some forest in behind the domesticated cherries. And you can see that it's holding its position. And again, I can take a piece of heat-resistant paper, parchment paper, and give it a nice little heat set. And now this is adhered, pretty permanently adhered, which is wonderful. Here's one that's been done a couple of days ago. Whoop! That one wasn't ironed. It was just stuck, just ready to show you. Let's have an iron and set that in position for one of these miniature landscape bookmarks. There we go. That brings me to the next material. This is called Peltex. It's a rigid stabilizer, originally developed for baseball caps, bowls, and heavy items. It's fusible both sides, and it's hugely important in my work. I use it a lot. I use it for this kind of applique, a kind of three-dimensional effect that I can get. So I'm going to cut the piece of Peltex to fit behind one of the images that I'm going to use maybe for a high rise. Moving back to the iron, I'm going to heat set. No, I don't need to put the paper over it because there's nothing exposed. This takes about 10 seconds, whereas the other took 2 to 3 seconds to set. Lifts nicely off of this, which is Teflon material, and I'm just ironing on a piece of pressboard again. Now I'm ready to turn the edges. So I would do the corners first and stitch the corners and then fold the edges in. Now the stitching is to hold and sharpen the points of the corners, because even though I'm pretty delicate and swift with the iron, I'm not getting the corners as sharp as I might like. So just a couple of very small stitches here, pulled quite tight, will pull the corner in and make a very sharp square corner. This little topping has already been hand stitched. I'll then lock the stitches, do the other corner, and I'll have a complete little building ready to insert into one of my landscapes. I call it three-dimensional applique. It's kind of an unusual technique. Last is needle turn applique, and that uses my thimble, and the needle is a very fine needle, applique number 12. Anything where you can get a fine thread through the eye. And I've taken a few stitches. I've basted these two sections together once again for one of these bookmarks. And I'm just onto a curved section here. And you can see that I'll be taking the needle and turning the edge under ahead of where I want to stitch. And the needle helps me to push that edge under and all the extra threads. And now I'm holding it with my thumbnail. And this is a very comfortable technique for me. I've done miles of this. Trying not to stitch to my finger because the needle is very sharp. Just into the edge of the fabric that I've folded. And the fold is on a curve here. So I need to take quite a few little stitches to hold that in place. And I just bring the needle through from the back and catch that folded edge and pull away from myself. And here I'm going to give it another turn, and it makes a beautiful little curve. It's very hard to see with these two fabrics, but you'll have to take my word for it that it's going to be a very nice smooth turn. And I put that down and give it a nice tug, and it pulls the edge right under. The stitches disappear. It's very hard to see any of the hand stitching on this technique, and it does go quite quickly. It's one of my favorites. Now I'd like to just show you how I've used and combined a couple of these techniques for a piece that I'm working on right now. This is the monoliths. There's 3 of them. They were hand appliqued using needle turn. Very quick and fun process, just put onto the sky fabric. The next layer were the rocks, and they were hand appliqued along the top edge. The next layer, the rocks were hand appliqued onto the grass at the bottom. And then I used the fusible technique, the first one that I showed you with the pebbles. And of course there are some pebbles. Those were added as a fusible element, and so was the fern here in the corner. That brings us to the machine quilting, which adds so much to the piece, and that will be the next segment. Hi, I'm here at my happy place with my treasured antique Bernina. It's a wonderful sewing machine that does everything I want, and no computers. I have a flat sewing surface. I can set the machine down in there, have a whole table at tabletop height here, and that is wonderful for machine quilting. You can't have anything draping over the edges. To prepare the 3 layers for machine quilting, or for any kind of quilting, there's a backing. In this case it's muslin, and some bat, and it's a not thermolam, but needle punched cotton, and this one is warm and natural. And then the top, which you'll have appliqued or prepared in some way. So how do we get these 3 layers together? I often, for small pieces, will use a spray adhesive. I take these outside, I don't spray glue in my studio, and put some paper down and put the spray on the back, lay the batting out, put another layer of spray on the batting, and smooth the top over that, creating a nice quilt sandwich for machine quilting. Now, if I don't do that, I might use pins. The pins need to be scattered over the surface about every 4 inches, which is at the corners of my knuckles. Once I have those, and to pin, I have to tape the backing down and smooth and stretch these 2 layers so that they all end up at the same tension. I'm then going to take it to the machine and start quilting. To do this first line of quilting, I am going to use a walking foot, and that is done with all straight lines. I can use the walking foot anytime I want a straight line. The walking foot's purpose is to pull the top fabric layer through at the same rate the feed dogs underneath are pulling the back fabric through, so that there's no wrinkles and bumps in the surface. You want everything to be smooth. I have chosen a very cheerful pink thread today, and I'm now going to change the pressure foot by just popping this one off. There we go. And now you can really get a good look at the walking foot. Separate component for this machine, and for the FAF machines, the foot is built in. I'm now snapping on the darning foot. The darning foot is a circle, and it's going to sit up above the quilt sandwich and stop it from coming back up with the needle as the needle stitches through, but it doesn't put any actual pressure on the fabric sandwich. I'm going to change the setting for the feed dogs. I've just dropped them and they'll stay out of play. So the feed dogs will not be pulling the fabric through. They'll be out of play, and my movement of my hands will guide this fabric sandwich through at the speed that accommodates the speed that I'm doing my feet. And here it's called free motion machine quilting. And it's so much fun. I have a little drawing down here. We want about 6 inches of the surface exposed. I'll start out by doing a little bit of stippling, which is I'll start out by putting my finger cots on. And those will give me a grip that's important to improve speed and allow you to just relax your fingers so that you're not pushing too hard or straining while you're doing hours of machine quilting. Sometimes I can do machine quilting for a whole day on one piece. My pieces average about 6 hours of quilting on each one. Usually you bury the beginning of the thread, and I'm just going to clip it and get it out of the way so I don't get it caught into the stitch line. And here I go. Lots of fun. I can make loops, or I can do a beautiful curve. I can use the needle to draw, and I'm coming up to some actual cherries that I drew on here with a white pencil, and I'm stitching the outline of the cherries and just going off in the wilderness and outlining a flower that I stitched. It's sort of like, guess what? A cherry blossom. You want to keep your fingers away from the needle. So far I've got all my fingertips intact. I'm just adding the stamens in the middle. So you can see how you can sketch with the walking foot. Now what happens when I come to a pin, I need to get that out of the way. And I have a little tool called a pin popper that helps me get a grip on those pins. And then I can fill in the whole background area with this beautiful stippling. I can write my name. I can do any number of fun things with this sewing machine. We could sit here for hours, but I want to move on. I want to talk a little bit more about thread. Take the finger cots off. The thread I've used for most of my work is chosen to blend into the fabric. So I have a lot of gray thread, and I have light, medium, dark, and into black and white at the other end. And that's what I use for a lot of the quilting where I don't want to emphasize the quilted line. I only want to show the shadow or outline of an image. On this piece, I've used two greens, a very light green in some areas, and this green for all of the stitching down here. So the thread there, and up here I used a kind of medium gray that kind of blends into a good part of the rock, And I think I used the same gray up here on the high rises, so it just kind of disappears. I don't want it showing, but there's certain areas that I do want to emphasize, and there I will use this green thread. Down here you can see the grass. So the choice of thread color is quite important. I can have a lot of fun with that. There are some wonderful rayon threads that are shiny, and these variegated threads that change color as you stitch along can give you lots of joy. They can highlight the design elements, this machine quilting, as they have done here. I've stitched around every window on these high rises. All the rocks are outlined. I've added some little grassy elements in here with stitching. So I've added the applique, and I've added the veins in there with the stitching. And down here, acres of grass all stitched in. So it can really emphasize your design elements or add a whole new design, as in the grasses. So how do we get that beautifully quilted sandwich onto a finished wall hanging? I don't hang them anymore. I mount them onto an artist's canvas. And I buy those at the dollar store or the art supply store and prepare them by painting the edges, something neutral that will blend into the piece I'm working on. I then cut 2 pieces of Peltex, the fusible stiffener, and they are exactly the size of the frame, the stretched canvas. And over that, I am going to fold the quilted top. So this is my layered quilted top, and I'm folding it and fusing it. First of all, I fuse it here with a hot dry iron right to one of the layers of Peltex, and then fold the back and adhere that using the hot dry iron, and stitch those corners to sharpen them up and make them look nice and square. I then choose a fabric that's suitable for the back, dark here, a lighter bit up here, and that echoes the dark here and the light up here. And I then am going to cover it with fabric in just the same way that I've put the quilted top onto this piece of Peltex. I will put a nice piece of cotton onto this piece of Peltex, making sure that the corners are sharp. Then I'll lay them together using that hot dry iron and lots of shoulder pressure, body weight, heat set these layers. So the whole thing is a huge sandwich with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers in here. And I'm then going to start stitching the edge by hand. It's kind of a painful process. It's a little bit awkward. I've got my thimble on and I'm hooking the needle through the quilted surface and stitching it back, catching the edge of the backing and lacing it along the edges with a nice tight, and actually here I'm using a double thread just to give it that little bit of stability, and I really make sure to get the corners stitched as tight and firmly as I can. Pulling, knotting when necessary, just taking my time, enjoying it. It's something I can do while I sit and watch TV in the evening, as long as you've got a good light to work with. When that's finished, it will go onto this canvas and hang on the wall. And I can show you one that's finished. How do I get it adhered to the canvas? You might use glue, but I'm kind of a stickler for sticking with thread, and I've taken knots through. There are 9 knots that I've taken right through to the front, one at a time, and double stitch through and then tie them on the back. And because the front is textured and busy, these little 9 spots don't show. So then I'm safe. I can then remove this whole sandwich if I ever want to display it in a frame with glass or in some different manner. And now I have put my hanging wire on the back, just as you would with a painting, and it's ready for the art gallery. I'm going to hang this piece proudly on the gallery wall, and I'd love to thank my husband Michael for his sense of adventure and his patience and skill with the video today. Thanks to Monica and the Vancouver Guild of Fiber Arts for the invitation to demonstrate my process. Thank you to the West Vancouver Community Arts Centre for resuming the exhibition at the Silk Purse and providing the live feed after this video. I want to thank Stephen Snyder, the gallery coordinator, for being our Zoom tech, helping with the opening and with the question and answers after today. And a big thanks to all of you for joining me today and helping to keep the arts going through these challenging times. I hope that I've given you just enough information to come up with some good questions. And I'll see you on Facebook Live.
So, Judy, I just have a quick question. Your design wall, which would be everybody's dream, I think, to have that.
Yeah.
Did you say you covered it afterwards with Thermalon?
Thermalam.
Thermalam.
Thermlam.
Oh, Thermalam. Yeah, because your pieces then can be moved around and really stuck in place. They seem to not fall or do anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the best. It's better, a little tackier than felt. Some people might use some felt on there or flannelette, but I find that the Thermalam is very good.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Judy, could you spell that again? Because that was a question that came up in the chat.
Oh, sure. Thermalam. Thermalam.
Excellent. Thank you.
Stephen, you're learning a lot here.
Totally.
We're going to get him stitched. Well, he does do some interesting things by hand, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
He has a good eye for color. Look at that tie and shirt combo.
I know. It's wonderful. Yeah.
We can run to some other questions and comments from the chat if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So we got a question about how do you find the fabrics that you use?
I'm an inveterate shopper. When I travel, I find quilt stores, and it's usually quilt supply stores that I shop in. They have good quality cottons that I prefer to work with. But I have shopped all the way from here to Monterey, California, every little shop. And when I travel the world, I'm looking. And I don't buy large quantities because I have luggage issues often. So I keep an eye, and I only buy the fabrics that I'm working with or know that I'm actually going to use. I don't really speculate. Try not to speculate.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay.
Being a tactile artist person, I don't like to shop online for fabric. I really like to touch it. I want to make sure that the weave is tight and firm and the weight is something that I'm comfortable working with. And I can tell at a touch whether a whole bunch of sizing has been added to stiffen and make it look like a better quality than it actually is. So I really prefer to handle before I buy.
That makes sense. And another question was, what was used as a middle layer in your work?
When I'm just doing straight machine quilting, I'm usually stitching onto a needle punched cotton batting, or it might be bamboo or silk even sometimes, or wool. There's very many choices in the batting, and that gives it a little bit of raised surface. That's what I usually stitch through. I can actually stitch right into that thick Peltex plastic material. I can stitch right into that if I want to quilt into that. But it's not fun. It's a bit of a struggle between the machine and the material. So I usually do the quilting with the fabric and the soft thin batting first, and then apply that to the stiff Peltex, which is actually the middle. But I have added these extra layers. Most quilters would not be stiffening their work like that.
That's great. Awesome. We had a question actually about the Peltex. Someone asked, what was one of the stabilizers called Peltex? And one of the viewers, who is also a textile artist, Jill Taylor, she popped in and said yes. So there are definitely
Great.
some friends watching and helping out where they can.
Good, knowledgeable people. Thanks, Joanne, or Jill, or whoever was replying.
So we've got another question. Where do you purchase the hellets?
Peltex.
Peltex, that's probably what they meant to say. Yes.
So that I must admit I buy by the bolt, and I buy it at N. Jefferson, which is a wholesale outlet. So I get it at half the price you would probably have to pay in the fabric store, but any good fabric store will carry it. Fabricana, for instance, will have bolts of it that you can buy by the meter. Comes in a 20, I think it's a 20-inch wide or thereabouts bolt.
That's good to know. And some great comments so far. Annette Taylor saying this is stunning work. Nice to be part of this talk.
Thanks, Annette.
Babs Perrone saying beautiful works and tantalizing demo.
Yeah, it's especially tantalizing when you can't hear some of the words.
Yeah. So it's a reminder, everyone. Sorry about the feedback that we had going on. So you can go back and watch and put your headphones in and catch anything that you may have missed. Another interesting question from Sydney. I have never seen machine quilting done before. Does the size of the stitch change depending on how much you move the piece?
Oh, yes, it does. That she's got it. If I move too fast, the stitch will be very, very short. If I move too slow, the stitch will be very long. And if I change the speed on my pressure foot, that influences how long the stitches are. So what I have to strive for is like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. You have to do two separate things. You have to control the feed, the speed of the pressure foot as you're controlling the movement of your hands. And they're not, how do you do your feet and hands at the same time, or, coordinate that? So it takes some practice is what I'm getting around to.
Totally. Got another question from Tim. He says, do you ever use your own photography for printed fabric?
I sure do, Tim. And I do that with a lot of help from a very talented nephew of mine. His name happens to be Tim. And he helps me set up my photographs for a wonderful printing company. They're based in Mississauga, Ontario. They're called Design Your Fabric. And you can send them your images online and they will print to my specs. Along with Tim's help, I can size and position the images on the fabric, and they will print, and I just had them directly print my photographs. So I'm not actually designing anything like a fabric floral or something. These are my photos that I'm having printed, and then I'm using those in some artwork. So as we're looking at the digital images on some of these fabrics that I'm buying, I can have my own artwork or my own photographs made into a digital print. So I've done a lot of that, but that's a whole different pathway of work. And I didn't bring any of them in for this talk.
Yeah. That's very cool though.
Oh, it's so much fun. I love it. I love being able to combine my photography, which I've done all my life, with textile, with quilting especially. And I do add a lot of heavy textural quilting. I take the photographs with an eye to texture, and that's what the quilting will add to it.
Yeah.
I often paint on the surface. Quite often after I do the quilting, I might do a dry brush painting technique. And I did want to include that in the demo, and darn it, I just didn't have enough time for everything. So that we'll have to try again maybe next year.
Totally. I've got another question. Which brand and weight of thread do you prefer?
Ooh, there's lots of good ones. I'll just have to refresh my memory. I guess Mettler. I use the Mettler cotton probably more than anything, but there's a wonderful company out of Calgary now. This brings, I'm sitting right in my studio, so I can show you a thread container here. And that's just some of the threads. These are my colorful, more colorful threads. All the neutrals are in a big drawer. So now I'll have a little look and see where those, it's called
Aurifil.
Aurifil, yeah. And that's a wonderful company. And I do love to support any Canadian suppliers and companies. Some of the threads I use are very shiny, rayon thread. And I only use those shiny and even metallic threads if I really want to accent the stitching. Most of the time I'm trying to hide the stitching. So I would use something in the gray or neutral family just to disappear. I just want a line of like shadow line.
Cool. Another question about supplies. What were the finger coverings called?
Let's see if I can find those. Wow. They're called finger cots, and they're used by nurses and doctors to do all kinds of poking and prodding that we won't inquire further about. But they are latex, I believe, and they unroll. I can get many uses out of them before they start to disintegrate. Your body oils will cause them to dry and crack eventually. But I use 4 of those just on the fingers that I'm going to use to hold and move. So 4 finger cots. Some people use gloves with grip, little grippy gloves, like garden gloves. But I find that that is too restrictive and maybe too hot sometimes. So I really prefer the freedom that these finger cots give me. I buy them by the box at the drugstore. I think Shoppers Home Care will carry finger cots for sure.
It's good to know that it's easy to find those things.
It is, especially if you're a nurse.
Totally. Another question. Marcia asks, pieces of pressboard for ironing. Details?
Good question. Where did I put it? What I'm really using is a clipboard, an antique clipboard. And I just put that Teflon sheet over the clipboard. Gives me a nice firm surface. I don't need any padding for this kind of ironing. So by using the clipboard, either the front or the back of it, it protects my table and my work surface from the heat of the iron, but it just gives me a nice surface to do that ironing on. Any kind of wood that doesn't have a grain or something bumpy, very smooth. It would have to be quite smooth. Good question, Marcia. She's calling in from Alberta.
Oh, great. Welcome.
Yeah.
She also asks, model of Bernina.
Oh,
what is it?
This is my antique 810. I don't know that you can even buy them anymore. I rather doubt it. It's completely mechanical, mostly metal parts. It's that old. It's a bit heavy to carry around, but I absolutely love it. It's so solid. It doesn't have anything to go wrong. It's such a basic machine. Normally I'm using my Baby Lock Jane. And again, it's called the plain Jane because it isn't computerized. It is just a straight stitch machine. It doesn't even zigzag. This Bernina will zigzag. But my Jane is in the shop right now, which was another little challenge to overcome getting my samples ready. I had to ask for my machine that I had given to a friend, And Antonia graciously let me use it for this demo.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And we've got a question from Anne. She asks, is the fabric color fast?
Oh, absolutely. You can pre-launder, but these are wall hangings. They're never going to be washed. I can guarantee that after I'm finished with this fabric, nobody's going to wash it. So because it's all stiffened and it's painted and, you know, it's a wall, it's an art piece. So if it was something I was going to have as a garment or a bed covering, I would pre-launder the fabric just to make sure that it was color fast. The hand dyes, most of the time, the people that are hand dyeing rinse over and over. They have set with a chemical or vinegar, so the color is color fast.
Good to know. Yeah, so Anne also says we're learning a lot of wonderful things today. Thank you for your lovely work.
Oh, good. Thanks for coming, Anne.
We have a different Marcia saying, thanks, Judy. So yeah, I think if people are enjoying this talk.
Great. Tai Chi, Marcia.
Judy, I just wanted to say something. After we hung the show with your piece, I was out at Costco in near Willingdon, and I was walking towards all of the new high rises and the buildings being built, but the cherry trees were just in front. There wasn't buildings in, you know, was layered differently. But I thought, oh, where did she get that digital fabric? You said digital fabric, because the high rises were exactly the same. I got out my phone and looked at the photo, and they were exactly the same as what was going up now.
Isn't that eerie? That's fantastic, because I bought that fabric first about 3 years ago. And since then, more and more high rises have gone up, and they do look like it. They are, you know, some of these sort of weird patterns in the fabric are exactly like it. I have taken many photos, and I'll probably use some of my own photographs at some point with the high rises, but I don't need to as long as I have this yardage. I'll use every little inch of it.
So do you remember where you got it?
Yes, I got it at the Needle and I believe. It was on 6th, just off of 10th in Burnaby, and she has gone out of business.
Yeah.
So you be able to find it from, if the manufacturer is still printing it. Ooh, I put it away. I'll be right back.
No.
It's by Hoffman. Hoffman's a very big name in quilting cottons. It's called Skylines. Hoffman Skylines.
Great.
And I bought it not just in black and white, but it comes in brilliant color, almost iridescent color. And it's really fun. And I've got some plans for that, but I haven't touched it yet. So I'm still excited about it.
Oh, yeah. We've got another a pretty great question from Martha. She asks, do you have a textile artist who inspires you especially?
Oh, so many here on the West Coast. I'm just surrounded here in this, the room here by these two, and in the show and in Vancouver in general. Capilano College has produced some wonderful textile artists in this area. The island is full of textile artists, and up the Sunshine Coast. My huge mentor and teacher over the years has been Nancy Crow, and she is a superb colorist. She lives in Ohio and travels the world to teach, and has some incredible books. I just am in love with her work and all that I've learned from her.
That's cool.
Thanks for asking.
Speaking of great artists, textile artists, and inspiration, and getting back to the Cherry Blossoms Textile Translation exhibition, Bonnie, you're one of the main organizers of the exhibition. Did you want to tell us a little bit about the show?
I'd be happy to do that, Stephen. And I may have ended up being one of the main organizers along with Monica, but that is thanks to Judy Villett. She was doing it for quite a long time, and they were having a wrap-up luncheon at her place, which was lovely. I attended, and she said that she had wanted to step back from her position doing that. So I said, well, for a year I could help you out until we find somebody new. How many years ago was that, Judy?
Something like more than one hand.
Yeah.
But it's fun because we get to communicate with all these wonderful artists. Unfortunately, Judy's still in the forefront. That's nice to see. The show has transitioned over time from one that really, the first one was at Fiber Essence, which was the gallery on 16th and Dunbar. And the pieces were pretty regular sized large quilts, beautifully done. And then we had to put some restrictions on size because we would run out of space, of course. It's no longer become a problem in that the transition to the kind of work has moved not away from quilting, but we're finding quilting merging with embroidery, and the two is all just one now. So we have a number of smaller pieces and some that are a bit larger, but I'm finding that the work perhaps is more detailed than it was originally. And this is a beautiful show once again. And I think having Judy do a demonstration like she just did, you realize how much work goes into a piece, which is encouraging for the general public that may not do textile work themselves, but to know how much work actually does go into everything. Some of the embroidered pieces might be 6 by 8 or 8 by 10 or very tiny. They will have taken as much time to do as perhaps a 6-foot quilt. One that isn't full of hand stitching, for instance, but beautifully put together. So I really would encourage you to attend the show in person. And now that you've heard about Judy and how the work that she's done has gone into it, look at each piece individually and try and figure out what really has gone on there. It's a nice show to work with, and it's been wonderful to see the transition in the theme always stays the same, but how it's kind of verbalized, if you want to say, in textile. It's wonderful.
To the people that aren't here in Vancouver or Lower Mainland, it's a mind-blowing time of year here. It is not at all like any place I lived in Alberta, for instance. The blooms are just magnificent, breathtaking, and certain years are better than others. And this one has, again, been a particularly beautiful year. I think, you know, Monica, you just saw a wall of cherry blossoms with the high rises. It's just breathtaking. And I happen to live in a new house, and behind me in the forest, I thought it was just a wild forest. It's all cherry trees. It's they're huge, they're tall, and they're covered with white blooms. I've been taking pictures, hanging out my bathroom window, and, you know, getting just my fill of cherry blossoms this year.
Yeah, it was so nice having all that wonderfully clear weather too, and the sky was blue behind all these pink blossoms. It's been gorgeous. Yeah. I have a quick question, Judy, about your presentation. You went through it and you stitched sort of 9 places, took a stitch to the back and tied it. But your piece at the gallery is so beautifully presented, and the edges are so close to the canvas. Do you do anything around the edge?
It's put on exactly the same way. It's a bigger piece, so it has more tacks.
Yes, right.
You know, a smaller piece like this one has those 9 tacks to hold it.
Well, like all your work, it's so precise and beautiful, but
it still moves away a little bit if you pull it, but it's pretty firmly attached.
Beautiful.
Thank you. This piece, by the way, is donation piece for the Vancouver Cherry Blossom Festival. And they're having a silent auction, I think this year, maybe it's online as a fundraiser for the Cherry Blossom Festival. So they are at ban.cb festival if you want to look that up and maybe make a bid on something. There's a lot of wonderful things to be had at that auction.
Excellent.
That's great.
We'll have a look. Yeah.
A lot of other great comments. People saying, you know, thanks, Judy. Wonderful to see your new studio. Hope you do more demos sometime. You're always such an inspiration. Another question: how large are your pieces usually?
These, lately, the last few years, I've been working about 12-inch square. I did a whole exhibition with 2 other artists, and we all worked on 12-inch squares, and I got obsessed with that size. But some of these pieces that I was showing on the video are quite a bit smaller. This one is 5 by 7. My pieces now kind of relate to the sizes of the canvases that I can buy. So this one is an unusual size. It's about 6 by 10. I thought I'd just show you these up a little bit closer. And this one, the one that I'm working on currently, is 10 by 10. So I like this square format, and it seems to suit putting several together. So you can kind of patchwork them onto the wall as more than one art piece. And because they're all similar size, they hang nicely together. They behave.
Awesome. Another question from Joyce asking, is the whole show online? Joyce, it is not online. You have to come into the gallery to see it. I might as well mention now, gallery hours are Thursday through Saturday from 12 to 5 and Sunday from 12 to 4. And that's the Silk Purse Arts Center in West Vancouver, right next to John Lawson Park. And we have all of the appropriate health and safety protocols in place. So we're making sure that your gallery experience is comfortable and safe and enjoyable. So if you have the opportunity, come on down and check it out. And the show runs until Sunday, May 2nd.
If that's Joyce in Calgary, just don't jump on a plane, my dear. Oh, Stephen, can people see the opening night on your website? Because
Yes.
you did walk us through, and some of the pieces are there, and you can get a real feel for the gallery.
Definitely. Thank you for mentioning that. I am going to put that link in the chat for people. So you can go see the opening reception we had with Bonnie and Judy and a couple of other artists. And they talked about some of their individual pieces. And also we took, a tour of the exhibition. So you'll be able to see the whole show that way. So we're just going to put that link right in the comments now. And if you also don't find it there or something, you can just go to our website, westvanartscouncil.ca, and the link will be right there. Awesome. That's great. Some other great comments. It's been spectacular, just stunning. Someone named Marilyn says, Judy, I got in late, so they're just watching the video now, but they're finding a lot of interest and use. And their question is, the rest of their comment is, what you are showing fits very well with the multimedia course they're taking. So they're going to take notes. So it sounds like you're giving some people quite a bit to think about.
I love the live demos that we've been able to have, for sure, and we can't do it. But the advantage of this one, Judy, is the fact that you certainly couldn't pack up all this stuff and take it to the gallery. And here you were in your studio and able to use all those steps and show us exactly.
I loved it.
Big benefit.
It certainly is for me.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And as we've said before, people can watch it again and again. Just come back to this Facebook post and they'll be able to watch this conversation again. So anything that you've mentioned, they can take more notes and check out all the links and other mentions that were in the comments. So I think it's probably a good time to wrap things up. So thanks again, Judy, for the wonderful demonstration and conversation. And thank you, Monica, for organizing the demonstrations every year, including this year. And thanks, Bonnie, for helping to organize the exhibition. It's been wonderful this afternoon. And
thank you, Stephen. Thank you for all you do for us. It's great.
Yes.
And thanks for everyone who came out to watch and who asked questions and made comments. It's really great that we're able to share the art making process with you and to see such interest from so many different people. It's pretty great to see the interest in textile arts. So thanks again, everyone. And a reminder, come check out the exhibition. It's at the Silk Purse until May 2nd. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And thanks for sharing part of it with us. Take care.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.